There was something evil lurking in Norwood Park Township, and by the time it was discovered, it would claim at least 33 young men and boys. The trouble, though, would start, as far as we can know, in a mortuary in Las Vegas. That is when this man, John Wayne Gacy, crawled into the coffin of a teenage boy and embraced the corpse. He would later say he was so shocked by what he'd done that he fled home to Illinois, and a father who didn't approve of him. He seemed to have a stretch where he was doing okay after that. He graduated from business college and got himself a management trainee job and got engaged to his first wife, Marlon. He joined the JCs, something he would continue to do for most of his life in different places and times. It was with the JCs he would find a life that excited him, where he would have his second sexual experience with a male, where he would booze it up and, in Iowa at least, engage in the type of debauched socializing that he enjoyed. Once he married Marlon in 1964, Marlon's father bought 3 KFC franchises for Gacy to manage. They moved into the family home in Waterloo, Iowa. Gacy set up a club in the basement where he would invite young employees of his to come and drink and play pool. Once they were sufficiently drunk, he would make sexual advances on them. In the beginning, if they rebuffed him, he would claim it was a joke, or he was just testing their moral fiber. In the meantime, Marlon gave birth to the couple's 2 children. Donald Edwin Voorhees was a Waterloo politician and a JC. Gacy sexually assaulted his 15-year-old son, Donald Jr. He was on a roll of sexually assaulting teen boys at that time, blackmailing one, tricking several into believing they were involved in some sort of bizarre scientific research, and plying others with plenty of alcohol. About 7 months after the assault, Donald Jr. told his father what had happened, and police were called. Gacy was charged with the assault on Donald Jr. and on another boy, Edward Lynch. He would claim the charges were political, that he was innocent, though he was deceptive during a lie detector test. And he had a number of JCs back him. He was indicted, nonetheless. Then, at the end of summer 1968, Gary hired Russell Schroeder to beat up Donald Jr. to dissuade him from testifying. He paid Russell $300 and Russell beat Donald. The police were called again, and it would not take long for Russell to serve up Gacy as the master of the plot. Gacy would be subject of a psych evaluation at this point, long before anyone died. The psychiatrists diagnosed antisocial personality disorder and predicted he would maintain his behavior and come into repeated conflict with the law. And they couldn't have been more right. He would plead guilty to a count of sodomy on Donald Jr., and the other charges were dropped. He would claim Donald Jr. had not only consented, but offered himself to Gacy, and no one bought them. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years. Marlon filed for divorce, claimed custody, all the property, and alimony. She would never return or allow Gacy to see his children again, which in all the circumstances was likely the best thing for everyone concerned. He behaved in prison and joined the JCs, even winning an award for his work for the JCs in prison. He was released after 18 months, but put on a year's probation. In hindsight, given the psychiatric reports, he should have been in prison longer. Perhaps longer periods of parole or probation, or if he'd been properly supervised while on his probation. His probation required that he move back to the Chicago area with his mother and that he have a curfew. and he did move there. He became a short order cook. He was arrested for the sexual assaults of 2 boys, but those charges were dropped when the boys failed to show up in court for trials. No information was shared with parole officials in Iowa. So once his probation was finished, his convictions were sealed and his conditions were over. It would not be long before the first deaths would happen, as far as we know. It's entirely possible that Gacy was killing before the first known victim and that he killed others that we are just not aware of. That's the nature of how the man killed and who he chose as victims. Gacy would buy a house in Norwood Park Township, which is a suburb of Chicago. It would be here that, according to him, all 33 murders, perhaps more, would happen. While he was luring, entrapping, torturing, abusing, and killing these men and boys, he was also active in the community with a construction business and playing as a clown, Kogo, or patches at events and parties. He would have large summer parties every year, attended by politicians and business associates, as many as 400 people at the house, while bodies lie buried in the garage and in the crawl space. His second wife and her 2 daughters lived in the house, while some of those bodies were there as well. She would move after they divorced in 1976. And after the divorce, Gacy's killings would accelerate. He mostly hired young men for his construction business, and many of these young men and boys would become his victims. He would often trick his victims into handcuffs by offering to show them a magic trick. Once restrained, he would sexually abuse them, torture them, humiliate them, and ultimately strangle them before burying their bodies on the property, usually in his crawl space. Timothy McCoy would be the first known victim. He was just 16 and lured into Gacy's car at the Greyhound bus terminal. He would claim that Timothy showed up in his bedroom holding a knife and that he killed him in mistaken self-defense. The boy had made some breakfast for the 2 of them and absent-mindedly carried the knife into Gacy's room while he was going in there to wake him up to eat. However, he did say that in killing the young man, he realized that for him, death was the ultimate thrill. Gacy would claim that despite his epiphany, he would not kill again for 2 more years, when he killed a boy, as yet unidentified, in January 1974. He killed at least 32 young men and boys up to December 1978, when he would make Robert Heist his last victim. The 15-year-old was interested in working for Gacy after overhearing how much he paid compared to his salary at a pharmacy in Des Plaines. Nearly as soon as he went missing, his parents filed a missing persons report. Heist was tied to Gacy quite easily, and though Gacy denied all knowledge of the boys, search warrants and surveillance would follow, stressing Gacy out. No one was buying his stories or his threats to sue the police department or his standing in the community. Taking Heist would be the end, as Gacy's world, the second secret murderous life he'd built around himself, came crashing down. He confessed to his lawyer, and then to a friend, and another, driving from location to location until he was arrested. After police began discovering remains under his house, he sat down with authorities and his lawyers and confessed one more time. He would claim he did not remember most of their names, that all the boys were runaways or involved in the sex trade. He confessed that at least 4 young males were disposed of in the river, and the rest were on his property. He would tell them where to find most of the evidence that would be used against him, although by then they had sufficient cause in warrants to discover most of that material during searches. He would undergo a lot of psychological testing, and he would feign multiple personality disorder, badly feign at it. That is, no one was buying it. He was diagnosed by 3 experts as a paranoid schizophrenic, but that does not necessarily remove his criminal responsibility. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and that too would fail. The state was able to prove the massive amounts of premeditation Gacy put into his killing, including marking out and having workers dig lime-lined trenches in that crawl space to ensure that he had sufficient pre-dug graves prepared for his victims. The jury wouldn't take long to decide that Gacy was guilty of 33 charges of murder and charges of sexual assault and indecent liberties. At the time, this was the largest number of murder convictions for any one person in American history. Having convicted him, now the jury had to decide what to do with him. Recommend the death penalty or not? It wasn't a difficult decision. After 2 hours, they came back with the death penalty. He would sit on death row 14 years before he was executed. He would spend much of his time filing appeals and trying to blame employees for the bodies under the house. His appeals would fail, all of them. He was put to death on May the 10th, 1994, and you would think that that would bring an end to the Gacy affair and that healing and closure could begin. Well, not so much. One issue is that Gacy may well have had one or more accomplices. Another is that Gacy could have had many more victims than the ones that have been identified or unidentified, but located on the Gacy property. Another issue is that the number of victims are indeed unidentified. A number of families had no idea what had happened to their young men, and the state would spend significant time and resources trying to find those answers. As a result of their efforts over the years, many families have received those answers, and several cold cases, 11 or so, have been cleared. Currently, 5 of Gacy's victims remain unidentified, and we're going to show them to you now and give you a bit of information for each one. We are also producing short videos for each of them. If you know anything at all that could help identify these young men and boys, please contact the numbers you see at the bottom of the screen. If you have a male family member gone missing between 1970 and December 1978, anywhere at all in the United States, and you're willing to donate DNA, we'll get you that information as well. Unfortunately, we will be referring to them with body recovery numbers so that any information that comes in can be correlated directly with the way the remains are identified by police. The first is John Doe 28. He was killed sometime between January 3, 1972 and July 31, 1975. He was somewhere between 14 and 18. What you are looking at now is a facial reconstruction of John Doe 28, prepared by forensic artists. He was about 5'9" tall. He had a plain silver-colored ring found with his left hand. He was wearing blue jeans, and his case number is 11006. The second is John Doe 26. He was killed sometime between June 13th and August 5th, 1976. He was somewhere between 23 and 30. Here is his facial reconstruction. He was about 5'4" with dark brown to black hair, and his case number is 11004. The third is John Doe 13. He was killed sometime between August 6th to August 5th, 1976. He was between 17 and 22. This is his facial reconstruction. He was between 5'9" and 6'2". He was Caucasian with dark brown wavy hair. He had an upper tooth that was displaced behind another tooth, what some refer to as an eye tooth. People who knew him well would recognize that tooth. His case number is 10999. The fourth is John Doe 21. He was killed sometime between August 6th and October 24th, 1976. He was 15 to 24, and this is his facial reconstruction. He is estimated to have been 5'10". He was Caucasian with light brown hair, and his name is case number is 11000. The fifth is John Doe 10. He was 17 to 21 and would have been killed between March 15th and July 5th, 1977. This is his facial reconstruction. He was somewhere between 5'7" and 5'11". He was Caucasian. He had an old healed injury to his left clavicle and a few dental fillings. What little clothing remained were 2 reddish-colored socks and a pair of jockey-style underwear. His name is case number is 10998. Body 14 was initially identified as Michael M. Marino, but DNA has now shown that those remains do not belong to Michael, who was killed along with his friend Kenneth Ray Parker in October 1976. Did you have a male relative go missing between 1970 and December 1978 anywhere in the U.S.? Are you directly related by blood to the missing person? If so, you may be able to donate DNA to do a direct DNA comparison to the 5 unidentified victims. If you recognize any of the persons from the reconstructions, please also call. We never know what key information will help to solve a case and help a family get answers. Remember that Gacy targeted hitchhikers and travelers, including those at bus stations arriving from or headed to other states. These victims may well not be from the Illinois area. Thank you for listening, and until next Saturday, have a great week. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.